Hello and welcome to another episode of Earth911's Sustainability in Your Ear. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe, your host, and we are really excited about today's innovator interview because it's unique. We're talking with 15-year-old Adarsh Ambati, who's one of the winners of the International Young Eco Hero Awards, which were recently granted by actionfornature.org. And if you go to actionfornature.org, you can learn a lot about Adarsh and all of his other co-winners or co-award recipients. Adarsh, how are you today?
I'm doing good, thank you.
Now, you're in San Jose, California, which, of course, is suffering from a lot of wildfire smoke and weather. You're living climate change personally. How's it feel right now down there?
Yeah, actually, even if you take a step outside, you can see the effects that the wildfires are having on the community. I think a couple of days ago, a lot of people were saying that it looked like Mars because the sky was just pure red. And that was obviously from the dust from the nearby wildfires. So, yeah, you can clearly see the impact of climate change and the devastating effect that these wildfires can have, even if they're thousands of miles away.
Well, you know, talking with you and reading about all the other award winners as well, I'm actually encouraged and I feel like we can beat this thing, but it's going to take a lot of work. And what I was really impressed with about your project, which was a neighborhood sprinkler alert system built using very inexpensive components that uses networking technology to connect many homes and help them put the right water out there. You stuck with this for 4 years, and at 15, you've really accomplished something. Tell us about what that neighborhood sprinkler system does.
Yeah, of course. So the sprinkler system integrates real-time weather forecast data to provide only optimal levels of water required. So by combining moisture content and weather forecasting, the device can save the most optimal amounts of water for the entire community. But more than that, it also has twittering capabilities. So it publishes information about both when and how long to turn on the sprinklers through the social networks. So that way, like residents in the community all they have to do is simply subscribe to this information by following the account on Twitter and utilize it to prevent water wasted during general purpose landscaping and stay compliant with water regulations, like those that require watering on specific days, for example.
Sure.
I think that by engaging the community rather than the individual, we sort of shed light on the problem that can only be solved through collective unifying effort.
And really, you're hitting on the key thing is if we're going to make this change as a society, we all have to pull together and understand why it's important as well as why we are doing what we're doing. Now, what was it that got you thinking about this in the first place and start thinking about combining social media, Raspberry Pi, which is an inexpensive computer hardware development platform, and sensors that can measure water in the ground? That's an awfully aggressive design concept for somebody who was 11 at the time.
Well, yeah, so at the time I was just starting around 6th grade, and I used to accompany my older brother to a local community lab called BioCurious. This is a place where even 11-year-old science enthusiasts can join just to learn from the amazing mindshare that the place is. So it is primarily a biohacking space for DIY biologists, but there were so many amazing members there, like Johan Sosa, for example, who was my mentor, who taught me the ins and outs of programming and coding and introduced me to the Raspberry Pi. So through his help, I was also able to be successful in making this project. But when I actually came to thinking of the project, I really was inspired by my surroundings. So a couple years back, in around 2017, California was still in a record-breaking drought. So the city began to impose strict water regulations. Because of that, my parents either had to let our yard die and turn brown, or they had to leave the sprinklers on, which meant that they would incur heavy fines. So that meant you either had to choose one or the other. And the alternative was, of course, choosing a smart sprinkler system, but they were either expensive or required elaborate installation processes, right, or didn't cover like all the use case scenarios. Like they only did moisture content, but not weather, or vice versa. So when I saw that problem, I really wanted to do something to solve it. So I looked back and I remember that I was introduced to the Raspberry Pi. So that's how I started setting about solving this problem.
Now, you did a pilot with 10 of your neighborhood households. How did you get that started? Did you go to folks and ask them if they wanted to participate in an experiment?
Yeah, I actually went door to door. So that was probably the most hardest part beyond even the building procedures and everything. Trying to get over that like initial fear of going door to door and knocking and asking people if they would pilot with my project. So what I did was because I wanted to pilot it with at least 10 homes from my community, I had to enlist these 10 households door to door. So I had to learn how to sell the value of this product to make it worth their while, to give me their time and effort. Eventually, though hard, it proved very valuable because the participants provided great feedback from user experience standpoint. And I also, this is where I added more features to help it more user-friendly, to be more user-friendly. So I added features like city water regulations, compliance check code, and logging information.
That's just such a great idea. I'm so impressed. Now, and BioCurious is an amazing environment in which to learn a lot of different things, because you'll find biologists there who used to be coders and now see cells as being very like code. Now, you had this initial success. You found that your 10 neighbors could save about 50,000 gallons of water over 2 months. And then you kind of went into a period of hard knocks. Tell us about the path from that time, which was, as I understand it, between 2017 and 18, and when you won the award, which took a couple of more years. What was that you were trying to do, and how did it turn out?
Yeah, so I thought that pilot study would be enough. So I went out to more water companies and tried to see if I could do a larger pilot study before I go pilot, because 10 homes, while is good enough to start the next step, it didn't really seem like something that would finalize that this prototype is a successful prototype. So I went out, reach out to many different water companies in my area over the last, I think the 2017-2018 period that you mentioned. I reached out to at least 10 different water service companies in our area, and either I didn't get a response or they were a little bit wary about having a 12-year-old at the time basically pilot a prototype in their neighborhood, which is understandable. But eventually, I graduated middle school, I went to high school, and I continued to work on this prototype. I continued to build on it, and I submitted it for the Raspberry Pi Coolest Projects USA competition, and there I won first place in the hardware category and was featured in a Magpie Raspberry Pi magazine. And luckily enough, one of the people who read that magazine was also on the board of a really small but really nice community water board company. So they now are looking for me to pilot this prototype in their neighborhood. And it all happened because I continued to work on this project.
Now, that's such an incredible startup story. I can't tell you how envious I am that you had this experience at your age. But you also had another step up in terms of awareness when the CEO of Raspberry Pi, Phil Colligan, started to feature this project and interviewed you for a TEDx speech. What was it like to go from hopeful to a lot of people wanting some of your time and attention and to get involved with your project? Was that part of what was frightening too?
Well, actually, it was really scary. So as I explained before that, I just had success in my local science fair. I didn't really have any success reaching out to other companies or even in larger science fairs or project competitions. Then after I won the Raspberry Pi competition, I was suddenly introduced to this whole new world where people like Philip Colligan, who, as you mentioned, wanted to interview me for his TEDx talk. It was really amazing. At the same time, it was also a little bit crazy because I definitely did not expect this level of attention. But after getting some adjustment to, eventually it became easier because all I really wanted to do was talk about what I was passionate about. So as I shifted from the attention side to just talking about what I'm passionate about, things became a lot more easier.
Now let's shift gears a little bit and just talk about what you've learned from this experience. Now, as a young person looking at this very established way we provision and deliver water in our communities, you looked through that and found a different way of thinking about it. Why is it important for young people to start to deconstruct the world and put it back together in sustainable ways?
Yeah, so the environment, this is what I think. The environment encompasses all that we need to sustain life on the planet. So today, there are massive problems ranging from water shortage to climate change that threaten this environment and thus indirectly all life on the planet. So while legislation and grassroots activism are 100% necessary to curbing and reversing man-made problems, innovative solutions are also crucial to solving such issues. So I would implore all young innovators today to pursue environmental projects, as the destruction of the environment will affect our generation the most. If we as youth choose to ignore the problem, it will only magnify until it can no longer be solved. By setting our minds to developing these innovative solutions that help the environment without drastically changing one's life, we can inch by inch, little by little, overcome worldwide issues. And as these issues pertaining to the environment affect us all, it is the most imperative that we start to create projects aimed to protect, help, or sustain our planet immediately.
So what skills would you recommend other young people develop to start thinking about disruptive solutions to their daily challenges?
Yeah, I think that I would recommend that first you have to start being more aware. Like, you can't solve a problem if you haven't even recognized the problem exists. Mm-hmm. So there are so many different problems in our status quo, in our daily lives, but we just have to be aware of it. For example, for my sprinkler project, I first saw the problem when I was driving to school in the rain one day, and this was back when we still had a drought, and I saw one of my neighbor's lawns with their sprinklers on in the rain while we were in a drought, which just seeing the runoff made me think of how much fines that they would incur, as well as the amount of water that would have been wasted. So first, the most important thing is being aware. Second, once you have identified the problem, you have to think critically and have critical problem-solving skills, because you have to bring many different concepts together to actually create an innovative solution. For example, I had to bring my knowledge of environmental science, physics, computer programming, software testing, and even of social media in order to develop this solution. And lastly, as I explained before, I think arguably the most important skill to develop is being able to take criticism. Every new piece of advice is like adding another team member, right? You get a whole new perspective. And the way I do it is you take advice at its face value, assess it, and let it go if it's not valuable or if it's invalid. Being able to discern constructive versus deconstructive criticism is one of the hardest to develop, yet most valuable qualities an innovator can have. So these three skills of being aware, critical thinking and problem-solving skills, and being able to take constructive criticism, I think are the three most important skills that any innovator should have.
I can't tell you how right you are. And I've done more than a dozen startups. Now, and I know the answer to this question, but you must be optimistic about the future after seeing what the other award winners did. And were there any that particularly stood out to you as inspiring?
Yeah, there were truly amazing projects. So I think they were ranging from social change in their communities to political movements that they started. And that just gives me so much hope that although climate change is an increasingly pressing issue, we can save the environment and the planet as a whole. But we definitely need more people to see and recognize the efforts of these amazing youth, like the Action for Nature company, who started the Eco Hero Award, so that the issue of climate change is understood as a real threat, yet is still understood as something that we can solve through innovative and passion.
Now, what would you like everyone, all generations, to be aware of as they start thinking about making a pivot to a sustainable lifestyle? And, like we talked about earlier in the conversation, you can see climate change all around us, especially here on the West Coast right now, and you can feel it. What should people be thinking about, and what should they be reaching out to others to help either offer to solve or to take on a challenge and try to solve and come up with a new solution together?
Yeah, many people today believe that a sustainable net zero economy is simply not doable. but every day new technologies and new solutions are developed that further bring our world more to a sustainable future. So in my opinion, we can slowly but steadily inch closer towards this amazing future. But I believe that we as a society have to do two things first. First, we need to increase resources to facilitate environmentally sustainable solutions and technologies. Second, on the flip side, when it comes to these technologies and solutions, I think innovators need to be more aware of the user experience. And this is where being more susceptible to that constructive criticism comes in. Because if a device or a solution is not user-friendly, then nobody will use it, even if it makes the world a better place. A great example is the Raspberry Pi. Its ease of use can make even an 11-year-old like me build innovative solutions. So I think that any person, what they can do is after they follow the 3-step solution that I gave earlier, they have to start thinking more about the user experience as well. Because if they develop a solution that is not user-friendly, the simple answer is that nobody will use it, even if it changes the world. But by thinking about the end product, we can more facilitate change in a relevant fashion.
So you mentioned increased resources. Does that mean more education, more opportunities to explore across different disciplines as a student or as a teacher? Yeah,
I think that climate education especially, is something that we need to get better at. I think we do a good job of climate education when it comes to middle school and high school levels, but I really think that climate education should be pervasive even down to the elementary school level, where understanding the ins and outs of climate change and understanding the effects that massive losses of biodiversity can have on the environment and various ecosystems is something that young people around the world should be able to experience just as well as while they're learning math or grammar or any other skill that they're learning in elementary school. So I think that with this whole idea of becoming more sustainable, a shift in the educational system has to come with it as well.
Well, Adarsh, it's really been a pleasure to talk to you. You're a very well-spoken young person, and I have to tell you, I am incredibly encouraged by this conversation. I want to thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Well, folks, that was Adarsh Ambati. He is a 15-year-old from San Jose, California. His neighborhood watering monitoring system is one of the winners of the 2020 International Young Eco Hero Awards. And you can learn a lot more about that, as well as see a video and read a story about Adarsh at actionfornature.org. That's all one word, actionfornature.org. We'll be back with another innovator interview soon. This is Earth911 Sustainability in the Year. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe, and you all have a safe and healthy day.